Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for being here. My name is Jim Lynch. It's my privilege to serve as the Executive Director of AWSA. Thank you for joining us to discuss the logistical and messaging challenges around administering state tests as educators continue to claw through this international health emergency. Before I turn the mic and camera over to our panel, I just want to talk about the policy landscape around testing in Wisconsin and throughout the country. So as we all know, our standardized tests are required by both federal and state law. Last year, as COVID was striking the country, both the federal government and the state governments waived testing and all of the accountability based on testing. So then moving into this school year, back in August, when AWSA and the School Administrators Alliance was crafting a package of COVID-related legislative proposals, we included testing and accountability flexibility in that package. Very early on, I think it was in September, Betsy DeVos, the former Secretary of the US Department of Education, sent a letter to all 50 states basically saying that the US Department of Education for this school year will not waive the requirement to test. It would consider waiver requests on the accountability side. Just this last week on Monday, the current US Department of Education sent a letter basically reiterating that position to all 50 state departments of education. So the new department basically came again and said, we will not waive the requirement to test. We will look at waiver requests in terms of on the accountability side. At the state level, we've had the governor put forward plans for testing flexibility in his COVID legislation, and the legislature has not. So where are we at, and what flexibility is on the table? So the DPI has sent a request to waive the 95% test participation requirement, which we strongly support. The US Department of Education has until May to act on that waiver request. However, in this letter that I mentioned that the US Department of Education sent to all states on Monday, they said specifically in there that they would be open to waiving the 95% requirement. So I hope it doesn't take until May for the US Department to act on that request. So we have that information sooner rather than later. It is beyond frustrating, obviously, that I think federal officials have not worked out a path forward that ensures, reliable data at the local, state, and federal level, while also providing greater flexibility in this unparalleled time of health crisis. So, but that's where we're at today. And once again, school and district leaders are in the position of making chicken salad, for lack of a proper metaphor, this morning. And so today we gather, and the focus of our webinar today is to talk about the logistical and messaging issues around test implementation this year. This morning's session focuses on grades 3 through 8. This afternoon, we're going to do the same session, but focused on grades 9 through 12. We're not going to focus today on how data will be used for state and federal accountability. That we will schedule an additional webinar later on in the year. So with that, at this time, I'd really like to thank AWSA members Laura Lundy and Tim Schell for joining us today to sort of help us discuss these issues. Laura is the Director of Curriculum Instruction in the Medford School District. Tim is the Director of Curriculum Instruction in the Waunakee Community School District. And at this time, I will hand the mic and camera over to you, Tim. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jim, and welcome everybody this morning. It's great to be here, and great to be here with Laura and also Jim, and Jenna is handling all of the technology behind the scenes. So just going to advance, we do have some polls for you, and Jenna, if we could open up the first poll, we want to kind of take your temperature. How similar is your 2021 testing plan to your previous testing plan? No changes, slight changes, major changes, to be determined. We'll keep that open for a little bit, see where you are at. And thank you for, responding to the poll. That really will help Laura and me fine tune some of our responses and anticipate kind of how much open floor we want at the end. We're going to do our best to hit the middle in our prepared remarks. And then obviously we want to be responsive to everything that's on your mind today so we can get ourselves into a good place. And we're at 97 of 115. If you could just kind of end the polling, Jenna, because I think we pretty much have the pattern. And I think the winner here is slight changes. 57% of you are there. A few of you, the lucky ducks, have no changes planned. And then we have a sizable portion, particularly if we combine, you have major changes intended or you're still to be determined. And so for our friends who are joining us today on the to be determined lane, we hope that this morning's session is helpful in helping you, conceptualize your approach. If you could share those results out, Jen, I don't know if there we go. I was mentioning it and I wasn't sharing it. It's poor facilitation. Okay, so next we have a little different poll. And that is, if your testing plan has changed, which for most of us it has, what is your biggest hurdle to overcome? Will our remote learners show up? Will we have increased opt-outs, space for distancing, finishing within the window? And you can see the others here. Proctors, will students be ready? Will students be motivated to do well? And that poll is open. Okay, looks like we're tapering off, so we'll end the polling and going to share these results out. Our leader at 48% is, will our remote learners show up? Followed a ways back by 21%, will our students be ready for the test? And I think that's a concern for all of us, but for some it's our biggest hurdle. After that, we have a very close relationship between will we have increased opt-outs at 11% and will students be motivated to do well at 10%, and then a little bit on distancing and a little bit on finishing within the window. But I do think that is our questions are around our kids. They've had, like all of us, an unprecedented year of pandemic schooling, and also things happening related to the pandemic in their lives outside of school. And for our learners that are in remote, will they want to come on campus, or will their parents want them, will their families want them to come on campus to take a state assessment? And again, for all of our students, when they take the assessment, where will they be at? So those questions are very much on Laura's mind and my mind as well. And we hope to kind of discuss these together today. So I'm going to close this down. And we'll move on to our next slide. So a little bit about forward modifications for 2021. Even before the federal department shared some of their ideas around what flexibility could look like, DPI did place some modifications in place for us for forward in 2021. So the first is they did extend the window later into May. So now we have almost 2 months of an assessment window. We go into mid-May. And I think that, is going to be helpful just to try to get scheduling done, especially if we're trying for small groups and trying to reach remote learners where the families may be reluctant to have them come in. It also means that if you think the situation for having students participate will be better later in the spring, that's a little bit of flexibility based compared to our spring 2019 schedule. DPI was also able for the forward exam to reduce the length of the assessment. So as you've probably seen, but if you haven't, the large writing component, the TDA, is not on the ELA this year. So the ELA test is going to be significantly reduced in time because of the lack of the TDA. Writing's important. It's something that DPI values. It's something I think all of us value, but that extended writing component to the forward exam is not going to be provided this year in the interest of reducing the amount of time required to complete the assessment. The other thing is kind of a behind the scenes item with these standardized assessments is that our vendors who provide us with these assessments, and in the case of the forward, that's DRC, they are continually putting in the tests that our students take in the spring, field test items. And these are items that our students respond to. These are items that don't count towards their scoring, but they are part of their test experience. And the purpose of the field test item is to take a new item, see how it performs, in anticipation of it showing up as a scoring item in a future test year. And so in the interest of time, DPI has worked with DRC. There are no field test items this year on the science, ELA, or math. And as a result, that also shrinks our testing time a little bit over previous years. And at the link, you can see what DPI has as the suggested test times. Again, the forward is an untimed examination. We're going to have kids that will have all kinds of different time requirements. The other thing that DPI has done, and it's great flexibility. Now, operationally, will we all be in a position where we can make use of this flexibility or even need it? Will it meet a need with our families? Remains to be seen. But normally, the forward exam was only operational for students to take it between 7 a.m. in the morning and 5 p.m. in the afternoon on weekdays. In the interest of providing more flexibility for us to schedule to potentially work with families of remote learners on their concerns about mingling, we now have extended testing hours. So on the middle of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the forward exam is open now an additional 3 hours to 8 p.m. at night. Now, again, as we can see in the last bullet, the forward exam must be administered at school, no home testing items. So in order for us to make use of these flexible extended hours, we do need to have the students on site. We do need to have test supervision on site in these extended hours. That's no small feature. However, yes, we can go later in the middle of the week. And we also have a within the day option on Saturdays. So again, if you want to kind of do a throwback and do forward exam breakfast club on a Saturday, that is an option. Can't guarantee the breakfast club soundtrack in the DRC software, but Saturday testing is an option. So if you do have families who are very cautious about coming on site to mingle with your regular on-campus students, and you have a staffing plan that allows you to do something on Saturdays or these extended hours in the evenings, this is an option. Now, be advised, there is no tech support or help desk during the extended hours. All DRC is doing is turning on the student testing component. If we run into an issue on Saturday or evening testing, then we're just going to have to kind of roll that issue over into normal business hours. Also, because this is something that needs to be turned on by DRC, there is a request. You can't just schedule students in on Saturdays, your request will be honored, but DPI is asking that we submit a request at least a week in advance. And there's a link to that form off of the slide deck. And again, it is just the reality of these state assessments because they are used. They're designed, I should say, for our accountability. And also because, again, related to the field testing, these items are supposed to be secure. And the concern is that if it's administered at home, we don't have the kind of test administration we would have in school. And potentially we could have screenshotting or cameras taking photos of questions, and then they would no longer be secure items. And all of those items would need to be replenished for future years. Those are the drivers for why the Ford exam has to be administered on site. I know some of us have been doing our local district testing on computer-based platforms, and we've sometimes administered those at home for our students learning at home. That's not an option with the Forward. So I'll just kind of pause for a moment and let that sink in. I'm going to check our chat. Thank you for putting the slide deck in there, Jenna. Much appreciated. So we're going to get into some of our organizing questions for today. How are districts planning possible options for including students who are in virtual education models? And how are districts planning scheduling considerations for schools operating in hybrid models? So again, how are we managing our logistics? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura.
Thanks, Tim. So Medford has been, actually, we've been very lucky. We've been face-to-face since September. We do have a virtual hour. So 2:30 to 3:30, the last hour of the day, we do have for our remote students and also for our teachers to plan for our remote students. So we are actually a hybrid plan. We do have students that are obviously quarantined, but then we do have some choice remote students. Not as many at our elementary and our middle school as we do at our high school. So we are planning really no change for our face-to-face students. And I think from the poll earlier on, I think there is a chunk of you that you probably won't do a lot for your face-to-face students that is different. We just test during our regular class periods. We ask our fourth grader teachers, when do you want to test? And they just test in the classroom. When are we going to test our remote students? That's obviously the change this year. And I think that the key is flexibility, as always, and that's a word that we've learned and really felt. How flexible can we be? What kind of choices can we give our parents? And we can either bring or bus our students in. And I think it's important to ask those remote parents to give them a plan, but to say, would you be willing to have your kids sit in during the regular testing period? And we're going to give them that choice so that we don't have to plan something else for them. But if they are not comfortable with that, we are going to offer some choices. So one of those would be to come in during that remote time from 2:30 and then, a couple of times a week, or we could have, if there aren't that many of them with this option, we could have other people proctor in a room where the child and the proctor is in the room by themselves, or a couple of children, so that we can socially distance those kids. When I looked at the survey, all of your answers and ideas, there were a lot of you have asynchronous days or hours. So like an asynchronous Wednesday or a Friday. Some of you also talked about after school hours. Like Tim had said, that is now an option. Saturdays, and possibly some off-site locations as well. Also, how to get your remote students in your building. That was probably the number one on the poll. 48% of you are worried about that. How do you get your remote students in? And I think, again, it's that flexibility and that choice for parents so that they can really feel safe about sending their students to school. But one of the ideas that people had was scheduling families first instead of grade levels. I thought that was interesting. I had not thought about that before. Instead of saying, okay, all fourth graders are at this time and all third graders are at this time, but rather having, if you have multiple kids in a family that need to test, to have them schedule first. And then asking parents to self-select sessions in things like Sign Up Genius. I actually in Medford, we use that program, and it's quite easy. Testing appointments, calling all your parents, and obviously that depends on how many remote students you have. And then keeping groups small for social distancing. So those were just some of the ideas that came up on the survey and what we're planning to do in Medford. Tim, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Laura. And a little bit about Waunakee's plans for the Ford exam. So first, for a bit of context, we are located in Dane County, and Dane County has fairly stringent public health guidelines for schools right now. We have since the beginning of this. So we do have a requirement of 6-foot distancing for all of our students, which with our enrollments and our classroom sizes really does mean we're in small groups to begin with. We really don't have a lot of flexibility to run anywhere near capacity and maintain any semblance of regular classroom furniture, et cetera. The other thing is, depending on our grade level, we have between 25 and 32% of our families opting their students into a virtual delivery model. So our delivery model, K6, is students are on site if they opt for hybrid for a split day, AM or PM, on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And when students are on campus for their almost half day, they get their ELA block, they get their math block, and they get a morning meeting or an afternoon meeting. And then they get the remainder of their content areas on the other side of the day in a mix of synchronous and asynchronous remote learning. And then Wednesdays are asynchronous. And that's the K6. So we've got about 70% of our students in that split day hybrid and about 30% of our students in remote session. And then at the middle school, we are also now in hybrid. We weren't for a while. And because of the nature of our middle school schedule, students are split into 2 cohorts and they attend on alternating weeks. We need that to accommodate how some of our electives are scheduled. So a student is either on site Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday for a whole week on an abbreviated day. We're not doing lunches yet. And when they're not on campus on their other week, they're virtual. And again, we have approximately 30% of our students in all virtual. And we're operating the 7-8 in a concurrent model. So students who are not on site are zooming in to the class that's operating on site. So for testing, we're taking different approaches between the K6, which is in the split day model, and the 7-8, which is on the alternating week model. For our K6 students, we're going to try to assess our hybrid students during their time, their regularly scheduled time on site as much as possible. However, for our hybrid students, and again, our K4 students have been in hybrid for much of the year. 5 through 12 only joined at the beginning of second semester in late January. So for 7-8, we are going to be assessing students on the hybrid on their asynchronous Wednesdays. We're going to ask them to come in. We're doing this by grade, not by family. And they will, and that's what we're trying to do to protect the synchronous instructional time at the middle school level. When will we be testing our remote students? We're also bringing them in on the asynchronous Wednesdays. For K6, there would be no hybrid students in the building on those asynchronous Wednesdays. Segregation is automatic there. For the middle school, we are going to engage in site planning to keep our virtual students separated from our hybrid students when they come on site to test. And we're going to use a mix of days to do that. And again, we're just assuring families there will be no mixing of students between virtual and hybrid. And we have to keep our group small automatically because of the 6-foot rule we're operating under in Dane County. So a little bit of a different scenario, and certainly some different uses of the Wednesday time. How are districts planning for a potential pivot to virtual during the testing window? When we were planning this webinar, even a few weeks ago, our rates in Wisconsin, like the nation, were higher than they are now. We seem to be in a positive trend. Vaccinations are steadily advancing. Yes, we have some of these new variants, and that's probably going to present some headwind at some point. At least that's what the medical people seem to suggest. But our trends are very positive. So it's likely this is just a hypothetical. I will say for us, we are not making any detailed plans at this stage for a pivot to virtual. We see it as a low likelihood, and we really can't anticipate when it will hit. But if it were to hit, we know that we would still need to test the kids on site. So the plans might not look all that different from the schedule we have planned. It's always possible test participation might fluctuate. But one thing I can say for us is the way we've stepped into it, and because of the 6-foot distancing and because of our mitigation, we have not had to step back at any point during our process at the elementary level. And the elementary level has been open for us mainly since the start of the school year. But it is a possibility. And, so certainly if some of you have developed plans around what your contingency would be that you want to share towards the end of the webinar when we have open floor, would love to hear those. How are districts planning family outreach? So we will get into this a little bit. And Laura, I'm going to kick it over to you first.
All right, sounds good. So obviously the parent letter home is a staple, just reminding parents of why testing is important. And you may want to, I know we're going to add a little something in there about even in this day and age with the pandemic, it really is important to find out where your child is in the snapshot of time. So put that in we're going to put that in our letter. And I just have a quick story about mentioning opt out, but not making it too easy to opt out. A couple of years ago, one of our principals, instead of just putting in the letter that they were going to, that is an option, he actually put a little parent permission at the bottom. Do you want your child to opt out of the test? And that was so easy that we had a lot of students that wanted to opt out, and he got flooded with calls. He had to call every one of those parents and try to convince them that they do need to, and it would be great for them to test. So just FYI, you may not want to put a permission letter at the bottom. We know, and I know Tim talked about it too when we were planning, that it's a policy. We have a form. It's on our district webpage. So if parents do want to opt out, we direct them to that. But yeah, so opt in instead of opt out was another suggestion that I saw on the survey. So the other thing that we've done, because the forward is still coming up, we are actually doing the ACT planning right now. We had a parent Zoom session, Q&A, where we just had it live at noon, and then we also recorded it just in case parents had questions, and just kind of going through our plan and our logistics to keep kids safe. So that might be another option that you could have in addition to the letter.
Our situation normally would be very similar to what Laura's described. I mean, we are transparent with parents. They do have an opt-out option, but we introduce that information fairly close to the beginning of the testing window. And again, we make a reference to it, and we ask parents to follow up with their child's school if they have a request for more information. And then and only then do we provide them with the opt-out form. We actually don't even put our opt-out form on the website. We ask people to request it, and then we provide them with it. This year, and this was not an easy decision it was an easy decision for us because we knew what we needed to do, but I would say it might not have been a comfortable decision for us, is we actually sent a communication home a few weeks ago around spring testing for all of our levels. And we included a direct link to the opt-out form in the communication. And our reason for that is simply to facilitate our planning for our virtual students. Because again, we have approximately 30% of our students participating by virtual, to bring them on campus, to organize busing because they're not currently on busing routes, to make sure we've got spacing plans for them. We felt it was necessary at all of our levels to really have a solid understanding fairly early around what our test participation for virtual kids would look like, because there's some additional planning and our numbers are not small. So we will see where our opt-outs land. That letter went out about a week and a half ago, almost 2 weeks ago now. And we have seen some opt-outs. We've always had some opt-outs in our district, but we haven't seen it go through the roof yet. And it remains to be seen as we get closer to when we actually test, if those numbers shift a lot. But so far, putting it out there early has not led to a lot of increase. As schools move forward in their planning, and at the high school, and we're not talking high school, but the nature of the high school testing is such that they're sending parents a separate form to confirm their participation so they can work on seating that's separate from the opt-out. So we'll get a good look in responses there to see if what's in the opt-out, the normal opt-out process, is actually mirroring intentions. But in that letter, very similar to what Laura said, we highlighted, and we worked off of the DPI template with some additions. We worked off of a lot of the key talking points in this year of pandemic schooling. It's valuable for families to get a report on their child's progress for an additional standardized measure. Obviously, it could potentially be valuable information for us if we have participation that's representative of our student body. And we do also note that although, like I think all of us, we use multiple measures for our decision making, we do use forward data in placement decisions for supports and extensions. So not taking the forward doesn't mean you will not, as a student, have access to placement decisions. However, if the other criteria don't really shift the decision towards an adjustment for the student, if they don't take the forward, we'll never know what information the forward exam data could have added to that decision-making process. So we highlight that for families. The other thing, as I said, was we just have put this information out more and earlier to support our on-campus planning. We certainly aren't going to carry that over post-pandemic. We're going to revert to our normal practice, which is to reference it, but in a much more low-key way. Other questions from the members survey. As we looked at it, we were able to pretty much accommodate those in our session today, except for all of your questions around how to use results. Will they be representative based on the type of schooling kids have had? What if we have high opt-outs? And that's why, as Jim alluded to at the beginning of the webinar, we will bring ourselves back to have a conversation about that sometime in the summer, once the waivers are done, and once we all have our testing results, and we'll have a community conversation about utilizing the results. So those questions we aren't going to cover today, but we would love to have other questions. There are 130 folks in the session. If you have questions, if you could put those into the chat, Laura and I will do our best to tackle them. And Laura, as people put stuff into the chat, do you have anything you would like to add?
I do not, other than I think we've all been really good at being flexible and working through change this year. And I know that testing is coming up, and it can be, add to our nervousness. But I think we're all great leaders, and I think we're going to figure it out.
I agree, Laura. We've all made it this far. We're not going to let state assessment be the thing that takes us off the shoulder and into the ditch. It's just one more thing to navigate, although it's nice to see, kind of, knock on wood, our numbers for the pandemic looking better and better. That's certainly good as we head in. And I am not seeing any questions in the chat. So I think we'll give that a little more time if you have some wait time that could be helpful. But I want to get to our closing slide, which is, again, we will be offering for members a summer webinar on utilizing assessment results. It'll have the latest information on accountability, both federal accountability under ESEA, how state report cards and state accountability will be looking. Certainly DPI by summer will have a good handle on things within their control. I think the wild card is we're in the legislature's in session, and you just never can completely predict what will happen during a session because there is a lot of interest in these topics in the legislature. Laura's contact information, her email is in the slide, as is mine. If you have questions later on, would be happy to hear from you. And again, and I'll kick it back to Jim for some closing remarks, but on behalf of Laura and myself, thank you for joining us today. It's always our pleasure to provide this as a service for our members. There is a great power in our professional community, and as awesome members, we always have to be here for each other. So again, we really enjoyed our time with you today. And I see something popped up in the chat. I'm going to make sure it's not a question. How are you paying for extended hours, staff, and transportation? So Laura, remind me, are you doing any extended hours in Medford?
At this time, we are not. We're going to try to test our kids all in during the school day. However, if we do have to test outside of the school day, we're going to take that out of our ESSER funds.
That would be my thinking as well, Laura. And again, that allocation spreadsheet, there's still some ambiguity for some districts because of the action joint finance took a few weeks ago, but every district is assured of at least $100,000 in funding from the second wave of ESSER. Also, the vast majority of the second round of ESSER for schools is allocated through the Title I formula. And if you look at DPI's original spreadsheet, if your district, whatever your district had in the Title I column in that original DPI estimate, that has been unaffected by the joint finance action. And Jim, if I get anything wrong, help me out here. The Title I column is still up to date and effective. The $100,000 guarantee per district is still up to date and effective. What the Joint Finance Committee did was they took that lane for districts that were above the 100,000, but not at 395 per pupil under Title I, and provided an allocation to provide a floor of $395 of second round ESSER per member. And that is the area where Joint Finance stepped in and said, no, we would like to see this go through some kind of formula that DPI will have to develop around how much on-time learning you had. And so there is some ambiguity around it, but there's no ambiguity that we're all getting money in the second round of ESSER. And I think for everybody is probably going to be significantly more money than we had in the first round of ESSER. So Jim, do you have anything you want to add about the second round of ESSER funding?
Nope. Well said, Tim. And there's another question from Julie about, are you doing any off-site testing locations?
So I can answer that one. For our elementary, middle school, we don't have that planned yet because we're not sure exactly where remote we're hoping to put those kids in our classrooms. Remote hour. However, at our high school level, we are looking at an offsite testing. In the last couple of years, we've tested at our First Baptist Church. They had a brand new church with lots of space. We're not doing that for our ACT this year because we can't socially distance our kids, but we are doing it for our students with accommodations. So those kids that had multiple days and we didn't want to disrupt their schedules. So we are going to have those kids go off site, but not for our elementary and middle school at this time.
And I would just add, we don't have any plans at this stage to do off-site testing. I will say the one area where we may end up getting creative, and it's not an area we've talked about in this, is access testing for our EL students. For that, you know, that's something where there isn't a waiver option for families under state law, but by the same token, you can't force any student to take any test. But I don't know if this is your reality, but our reality is our EL students are virtual at a higher rate than our overall numbers. And so our EL staff, and we have a great EL staff here in Waunakee, they're engaged in some creative problem solving with our families. We don't anticipate that's probably going to be off-site, but if there was anything where we did something different, it would be there. But I think that's still going to be on-site. We just may do extended hours for the access. We'll see. We had a question in there about sharing your district's opt-out form. And see what we can do here.
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can share mine as well.
Yeah, I've got mine close. Let me see if I can. Anyone on the internet can view. Okay, I think I just put ours into the chat. If somebody could check that out and make sure it's a live link and I have my sharing permission set right, but it's the one our parents use, so it should be open to anybody with the link. And so for us, it's a soup to nuts for everything, including our local assessments, and it's one we had pre-pandemic. So Brad asked a question that I think I know the answer to, but I'm operating actually outside of my level of expertise. So I'd like you to take a peek at it. I think Brad's question is this: if the second round of ESSER funds aligns to the Title I formula, are there strings tying it to use in Title I schools, or can it be used district-wide? I believe while there are some general guidelines under allowable expenses, I don't think it's school-based. I think it's all in one big district bucket. Is that your understanding, Jim?
That's my understanding too, Tim.
Okay.
All right, I did find mine. It is a policy, so you have to scroll down into the policy and it's at the bottom of that policy. So I put that in the chat.
Okay. Last call for questions.
Question specific to Medford's RVA.
Great question. RVA, we have a kind of a running joke. RVA is us unless it's not. So they have their own staff that deal with all of their testing. They do a lot of it off-site because obviously the majority of kids are virtual everywhere. They're not just in Medford. So in the past, what they've done is they have rented out hotels, conference centers, and they've done different testing sites throughout Wisconsin. And this year, I know that they have said that they anticipate even higher opt-out rates than they have in the past. our students, a lot of our students in RVA, the parents are about deregulation. They don't want testing. So we do have a really high opt-out rate in our RVA, but unfortunately, I think it's going to be even higher this year.
Does the opt-out rate, like, does the opt-out affect the school district they're coming from as well, if they're part of the a consortium or if they're invested? And like, you guys have all different affiliates and investeds and all of that stuff.
Right, and it does. So for example, in Medford, we have a very good test participation all in our brick and mortar schools, but RVA, because it is so high, our federal, we have had some federal, I don't know what they want to say. They've sent us letters and we've been on their list because of our participation, because of RVA. And that's Medford. So I'm not sure about the other schools, but I'm assuming it works the same way. So we get all of the students that are Medford residents that are in the RVA, plus all of the students that do the school, not school choice, can't think of the word, but and those are our kids. So they do affect our district scores and our district participation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we had a question about any parent letters. And so let me just check something here. Anyone has the link, no sign up required. Okay, so let me, there's a view. So I will drop in the letter we sent home to parents about 2 weeks ago. I want to preface this by saying, if you've looked at the DPI templates, you can see we borrowed heavily from the DPI template. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. DPI, I think, has done a good job with this. But you can see there were a few little local changes.
I have to admit, I do not have a Wisconsin board letter written yet. I can send you last year's, but that's probably similar to what you already have. The WST parent letter, I can put that in the chat, but I don't have the forward one done. Tim, you're ahead of the game on that.
Well, and our need again was, you know, there's other parts of our assessment program I'm not feeling as ahead, and you know, we're rapidly turning more gray, and I think the thinning may accelerate here as we move towards April and May. But again, we've got 30% of our kids virtual, and we just needed to get this out. We felt early to get a handle on how many of our virtual kids. I mean, we want them all to come in, but we don't want to have to put ourselves in a situation where we're planning for all 30% to come in for separated testing and then only get like 15%. And so that's why we were so early on that. I mean, we always aspire to be on top of things, but this is a pandemic situation. If you're not there, that's a-okay. But that's why we went so early. Anything else in the chat or open mic? And so again, this is off of the DPI template. Don't feel bad. You can, you know, DPI went to the effort of giving us a template, and you can take it and you can modify it to meet your local needs. Let me tell you, this was not home cooking all in the kitchen. This was putting a little extra on the frozen dish and microwaving it. So
Mine is basically, hey, we've got to test you. These are the days that we'd like you to come in. If you can't, let me know.
you know, I think, Mary, if you do it that way, you know people are going to read it. Now, again, was there a little strategy in having this long message with opt-out appearing at the end? You can draw your own conclusions on that. So,
I didn't even tell them about the opt-out.
anything else for the good of the order? I think that's enough wait time. Jim, I'm kicking it back to you.
Hey, Tim and Laura, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really, really appreciate this, and everybody on the call. You know, everything that you've done through this period, when the history of this period is written, it's going to be about the heroic efforts at the local level in education and healthcare and our first responders. And speaking on behalf of the OSSA staff, it has always been a privilege to work with and for you, and that's never been more true. And so thank you for joining us today. Please, as you know, in the days and weeks ahead, if there's anything that you're struggling with, that you're not quite sure who to connect with, please, please, please reach out to OSSA. That's why we're here. You get to look into the eyes of those kids you're serving every day. The only way we get to impact them is when we help you in some way. So please give us that opportunity. So with that, thank you so much, everybody. Again, Laura and Tim, really appreciate it. And everybody enjoy your day, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much.